So, I think how I would want Katon remembered is really as this young man, vibrant, smart, intellectual, intuitive, all the things that you would want in a child. He was our only son, and he was just beautiful inside and out. And so, of course, from a mother's and father's perspective, perfect in our eyes, but of course he wasn't. But he was just a dream son in the sense that he loved his family. He loved being connected to his family. He loved his friends. It was so important to him that he was a support to his friends and a support to his family. There was lots of times when I valued his opinion around things so much because he could really bring a different perspective. So while he was young, he had a lot of knowledge about life and just a way of thinking about things that sometimes I just didn't, it's like, wow, I didn't think about it that way. He was an artist, and that was really a big part of who he was. That real creative part to him, aspect, that was so important, and really how he identified in everything that he did. Think everything from how he would run his own business to the kind of things he would do in his business. And he always thought about how he could bring his friends and family along. He always thought of himself as an extension of others. So when he thought about how it would benefit him, he'd also think how it would benefit others. So very generous young man, from little all the way up till he was grown. Just a great young man. And so so I would want him to be remembered as this really vibrant spirit that had a lot to offer and did offer to the world. So we're very proud of Katon. The challenges, of course, is that when you have somebody that is developing a mental illness, is that some of it was not uncommon to us in the things that we saw in Katon. Even from a little guy, there'd be certain things that he would say and do that you'd think, this is kind of little, I don't know, but this is normal for him because it was just a part of who he was. Early things, but for the most part, he was a pretty normal kid. He loved to run and play sports and those kinds of things. And then at the age of 14, he talked about feeling depressed, which for 14-year-olds is kind of odd for a 14-year-old to say, I'm feeling depressed or really bad and I don't know why. So we went to his doctor, family doctor, or pediatrician really, and he told him about how he was feeling and feeling depressed and sad, and his physician said, well, young people don't get depressed. So that's not something that they experience. It sounds like it's just situational, that, maybe you're going through a rough patch right now and you're just feeling a little, upset about it, but you should be okay. So, given that you're trusting the physician and knowing what he's saying about this, it's like, okay, well, we'll just see how it goes, and if it doesn't resolve itself, then we'll figure out something else. But after a couple of months, he was back to his old self, and he was fine, and so active in his life and with his friends. And then again, at 17, coming in 18, the year that he was to graduate high school, you could see that there were some changes. He started getting very quiet. He was struggling in school with some of his courses. He was getting so close to into graduation, and it felt like he had just, even though he had everything in place to graduate, that he just gave up. And he stopped turning in work, and he stopped talking to teachers. And when you'd ask, what's wrong, or, what can we do to help? It's like, he would just, I don't know what you can do to help. And he just was flat, and which was so unlike him. And so we were real concerned about that, that he wasn't going to graduate high school. And then he said, well, I'll just take classes outside of this. I'll get but I'm just not feeling this right now. And it's like, okay, well, we'll just have to go with it because it's too late now to change anything. But that was a real shift, because he was really looking forward to graduating. He was really looking forward to going to college and all kinds of things. And for that just to shift was really upsetting for all of us because it just was so unexpected. But then after a while, that resolved itself, and he was doing his own business. He drew T-shirts and sold those, which was great. And he wanted to do that in Canada. We have family there, so he went there to start his business and to involve his family and his cousins, particularly in his business. And so he was there for a couple of years. And the challenge, of course, is doing business in another country. I don't think he realized what it was going to take to be able to have a business. And so he would have to have a lot of money, and he'd have to have a lot of paperwork done, and he just wasn't able to do it from there, so he came home. And one of the first things I noticed was that how much weight he had lost and how agitated he seemed, which was unusual for Katon because he had a pretty happy attitude about things, but he seemed frustrated a little bit more than what he used to. And so we just thought maybe it's just the transition that he's going through, making his transition, being disappointed by things not working out. So he was probably about 24 at that point. And then probably about 6 months after he had returned home, he talked about feeling really, really depressed, and how he was having thoughts of running the car into a phone pole, or just not wanting to live anymore, or just having thoughts, not so much about not wanting to live, but just having these thoughts about wanting to kill himself, using his car or those kinds of things. And so I said, well, let's try to get you some help. And so we started seeking out the nurse practitioner. And he also started then sharing about, at that same time, about feeling like people were digging up under the house. Somebody was digging up under the house. And at that time, you could tell that he knew that shouldn't be, that's not a normal reality, but yet he couldn't unshake that this is how he was feeling. So that was probably the time that he had the most insight in terms of, I know that there's something not right here, but it feels so real to me that I'm confused about it. And so he went in and saw the nurse practitioner, and so he went in on his own. He didn't want me in there with him, and so I did share with her all the concerns that he had shared with me. So she treated him with the antipsychotic that also addressed the depression. And so he was prescribed that medication, and that seemed to help him for a while. He didn't like the way it made him feel, and particularly the fogginess around his brain, around his thinking, because his creative spirit is his everything, his art, and being able to be creative in his business and those kinds of things. And so, but he continued to take the medication. He got a job and was working full-time for about 7 or 8 months. And then there was a change because he had been treated with samples, that there was trying to get a scholarship because those medications are very expensive. So, but it had to change the medication. So while it still addressed the same issues, the shift in titrating him off that medication to put him on another, he realized he didn't want to go back on medication. So once that medication was gone, he said he didn't want to go back on medication anymore. And so he still was willing to see the nurse practitioner, but then after time, he started saying, well, she's on drugs and she's not helping me and I don't trust her. And so you could see some of the paranoia starting to come back in again. And at this point, he wasn't working because now the people that he was working for were setting him up, and they weren't good people, and he didn't want to work for people that were not good people. And so you could just start to see things fall apart for him. Now he's in his bedroom, he's got the blinds closed, and he's sleeping all the time. He doesn't come out of his room. I bring food in so that he can eat, and so for months, that's all he's doing. And so we'd go to work and we'd come home and all the curtains would be closed. The house would be totally dark. He'd have little pieces of paper. If there was holes in the wall, he had all the holes covered up with these little tiny pieces of paper. He just had this real sense that people were watching him. If a car came by the house, he said, "See, Mom, see, they're following me, they're following me." So more and more of his conversation would be about these people following him, people tapping our phones. And so he would still be conversating with us, but more and more it was around these kind of paranoia and delusional aspects of these feelings that he was having. And so after a while, he started talking less and less. And I remember one day he just said, I'm just not going to talk anymore. And that's what he did. He just didn't talk anymore. And the only time, though, that he would say something is if I would take him out. Sometimes I would just want to take him out in the car to get him out of the house, and he would start ranting about these people. See, look at them, they're laughing at me. And so just this really feeling like people were persecuting him and spying on him and taking his ideas and expanding them and not paying him for his ideas. And then he would just not say anything. But you could tell that he was now agitated and angry, and he would take things out of his room and hide them. If I was looking in the house for something, he said, "What are you looking for?" 'Cause my sense was that he had put something there that he didn't want us to see. He was smoking cigarettes, which he didn't do, but now he was, and he was hiding his cigarette butts in his bedroom. So we were really starting to get worried now because of this kind of persecution thing, that the way he was seeing things, that he was starting to become a danger to himself, or it could be a danger to others. And so I started calling people that I knew, folks that I worked with. This is what's going on with Katon. What do you suggest? What can we do? And of course they would say, "Well, you probably just need to take him to the hospital." It's like, well, he's not going to the hospital. I can tell you that. And so the couple of times we tried to talk to him about going and seeing somebody, and how, I'd say, "Katon, your life is nothing what it used to be. Don't you feel like you could use some help?" And it's like, no. And are they paying you off to say these things? Because if they are, Mom, you just need to stop. And so the more you try to talk with him about getting help, the more he was deciding that you were a part of the bigger. So you had to be really careful about that. So then finally I called I talked to folks at the county, I talked to doctors, and what can we do? He's not eating now. Can we do something about him not, could you sign something that says he's, not mentally stable, and could we get him hospitalized that way or intervened upon that way? And they said no, because he could still respond if needed in a normal way. He still looked normal. He still was bathing and dressing and all those kinds of things, so there wouldn't be enough to get any kind of hold or anything. And the challenge with that is that if you took him in and the hold didn't stay, then he wouldn't trust us anymore. And so then we were back to the drawing board. I'm looking all over the internet. I'm talking to people I know in the field about what we can do. And you just kind of have to wait and, for him to want it. And so, now we're starting to get really concerned, because now he's not sleeping at all. He's laughing all through the night, all night long. And he just didn't sleep anymore. And so he'd be in and out of his room, and then he would leave sometimes, and he would come back, but you had no way of knowing where he was or what he was doing. But about 4 or 5 days before the run-in with the police, it was becoming clear to me that I just got the sense that something as bad is going to happen, and we've got to do something. And so I called his nurse practitioner and just said, "I'm really, really worried that he's going to do something to himself or somebody else, and what can we do?" And she said, we just don't have enough to have a hold. He has to do something, and it has to be so evident that even though he could talk to the judge and talk, that they would say, no, we're going to place a hold. And she says there's just not enough there to do it. She said, but what you can do is to go home, wait for him, and then just try to do what you can to get him in the car and just take him to the hospital and see what they can do. So these were all the planning things that we were thinking of. And that Wednesday, he had left the house. I had left to go to work, and then we didn't see him. So I actually had talked with her again Thursday morning, not realizing that he had already ran into the police and that he had been shot and killed the night before. So that morning I'm thinking, okay, today's the day. Today is the day. If I've got to take him in the car, whatever I have to do, I'm going to do it. So we waited. I called the crisis line and I said, I'm looking for my son. He's really sick. I need to talk to somebody to help me find him and to get him some help. So they took the information. They said, we'll call you back. And about 30 minutes later, the detectives came to the door to tell us that he had been shot and killed the night before, that he had been in the car. They had pulled him over for erratic driving, and that one of the officers went to the car to pull him out. They had tased him 4 times. They went to the car to pull him out, and he took a gun and he shot at the officer, and then the officer shot back. And he died at the scene. So it was just too little, too late. And for us, it was like, what did we do or didn't do? Why wasn't there anything out there that could have changed this? So my hope is that by us telling our story and telling Katon's story, that we'll be able to do that, to change it for other families. So, but he was so sick, and we couldn't get him help, nowhere could help us get him help. So, from this experience and just reflecting back, and 4 years later, just really thinking through, our first thought is that it should have been easier to have a hold placed on someone that that's sick, that that or is getting ready to do harm to themselves or someone. That just should have been easier, and that was our thought at the time. But as you kind of get from under that immediate reaction, you start thinking about what could we have used that would have been most impactful for us. Really would have been not just for Katon, but for us as a family, somebody that understood what we were going through, that we could talk to when all these different things were happening, that could have helped guide and supported us through this process. Somebody for Katon that he could have connected to, that could have talked to him about how to manage his medications and the symptoms or alternatives so that he could continue with his art. That medication in and of itself was not the only option, that there were other options, and that we had early on the support that we needed at the beginning of this, and just the support as a family. When the stress on everyone is so overwhelming, it's every day from sun up to sundown that you are stressed out about this situation. You don't know what's going to happen next because mental illness changes. So what you see today in that person could be something different you see tomorrow, and you're having to figure out, what do we do now? So really having someone there early on, really knowing what's available out there early on and who can help you navigate through those systems early on would have been critically helpful for both us and for Katon. And I think that was what we saw really, really lacking in the community, that nobody could tell you specifically what to do and how you needed to go about doing it. And so you're this family by yourselves out there lost in a wilderness of the unknown with no direction. You're just hoping and trying to figure out. And for us and myself already being involved in the mental health field, you would think that I would have the answers needed, necessary to navigate the mental health system, and that just wasn't the case. And so really you need somebody, even as a mental health professional, you need somebody to help you as a family so that you can step out of that role and they can really take that piece on so that they can be a support to the family. So that's what I see would be really critical in shifting the outcome. If I could name one thing, I think that would have been the thing for us, for other families. Particularly, one of the things is interesting to me, or what we found out, is that psychosis in and of itself is not necessarily treated by itself. It's usually folded up under another diagnosis. And so kind of our experience was, as people, well, what's his diagnosis? Like, well, we don't know. We just know that these are things. And so the treatment for psychosis in and of itself is not something that is just treated in and of itself. People are usually looking for underlying, and then they want to treat it as a disease and not treat the whole picture, the whole person, which is the family and that young person. So that was kind of the piece that I found that was interesting, is that really the whole family needs the help, not just that individual. And so while nurse practitioners and other professionals definitely are willing to work with families, that's not their primary mode of working with folks that are experiencing mental health issues. So I think it's a shift in how you work with folks that have mental health issues and how you engage the families and work together. It really is a big shift from traditionally how services are provided. So, yeah. The things that motivated us about how we wanted to, what did we want to bring to the community as a result of what we went through, was educating others about what's out there, what's not out there, the needs of families and their loved ones, and how those are not being met right now, and that we all need to be active in whatever role we are in the community to ensure that young people and families are getting the support that they need. I don't know that if you've not ever been through it, that you understand the impact that it has on the family's day-to-day functioning when you have a loved one that has mental health issues, and how it impacts everything from your own personal peace of mind to how traumatic it is to see a family member go through that process, and the powerlessness you feel as a result of you watching them go through it, and to really help people understand, have a much better understanding of that process. That's really what we're hoping to have happen, that we get services in place that really are there to support what we know to be effective in helping people early on, and not waiting for people to get so sick that it's much harder for them to turn things around. So that's our hope, is early intervention is really our best opportunity for everyone. And that's what we should be focused on. Not having knowledge about what's out there and how it can help support you in dealing with this situation is so critical. If you can have all the best services in the world, but if people don't know about them and they don't know how to access them, then it does you no good. So there's very little known about services and what's effective. The other piece is that there's very little known out there about psychosis in and of itself. And so, again, just kind of getting away from diagnostic aspects, but looking for things, or educating people about what are the symptoms or things that a person could experience that could be identified as psychosis, that then tells you, okay, well, this is our next step. This is what we need to do. This is how we need to respond. There's very little out there. So I think both around what the issue looks like, what psychosis looks like, how to best address that, and what are the services are available, all need to be out there throughout the community in wide varieties of ways. In our educational system, we know that young people, as I explained about Katon, all through his life was experiencing some kinds of mental health issues. And so we're most likely to see it, teachers are likely to see it, parents are likely, family members. And so how can we make sure that all of the community knows about these issues and what we're looking for and how to best help? So nobody should be left out not knowing. We all as a community should know these things. Shortly after the shooting, Officer Chris Burley, who was the officer that was shot, we met a couple months later, and we decided that we wanted to try to make something positive about such a tragedy. And along with other folks that said that they wanted to feel like they wanted to be a part of making a difference, a small group of us got together, community members, and said, what is it that we want to do with this? And so we called it Friends of Katon. It's like what we wanted to do was to be able to make sure that we get information out to families, information that wasn't available to us, and to put links in there that would directly connect them to information that was going to be the most effective way of getting them to what they needed to be. Our focus really is how to help parents identify early on, once they get that small suspicion that something could be going on, is for them now to start looking for help. The other part is that they know for the family themselves is to take care of themselves. That self-care is so important, and not to go through this process alone. To use resources available like NAMI, who has great family support system. They also have educational classes for families that are first experiencing somebody that's got mental health issues. So there are resources available, but making sure people get to those sooner rather than later. I think it was our way of just trying to have a positive impact, to have something out there that wasn't there for us, so that this Katon's loss would not be in vain. My hope is that everyone will want to start an early psychosis program in their community. We know it's a fact. It's a fact, no matter what, is that we know that young people are going to experience psychosis, whether it's a one-time experience or whether they experience over time. We know that there's a certain number of young people that will have that experience, and we want to make sure that young people have the right kind of services that are going to give them the best opportunity for addressing that, and also providing services and opportunities for families to get what they need so that they can best support that young person in their road to recovery, because that's the intention, is to have every young person get onto the road to the recovery and to have the lives that they want. And so it's not a question of if. My hope is that it's a question of when and how soon can we get it started, and to not give up. One of the things I've learned in this journey that no matter what is to never give up. And so it's definitely been a long haul, but anything that you start, anything that's worthwhile is going to be hard. It's going to be a challenge, but don't give up on it. It's for those young people, it's going to make all the difference in their lives and the lives of the community. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how soon you can get it going. Things I think is important for established programs to be focused on is outreach, and making sure that everyone in the community knows about ESA and all the natural places in the community where young people are going to be, where families are going to be. That you ensure that you are getting the message out is so critically important, because if people don't know that those services are available, then they won't access them services. And so I think that was something even that was learned in Multnomah County, was that you really have to get the message out there so that people know where they need to go and who they need to call. So please spend a good portion of time making sure that you are thinking through how do we make sure people are getting information, and and unique communities that may not have as easy access, so communities of color or other cultural communities that may not be as savvy when it comes to computers or may not get literature in the same way that other communities do, that you're thinking through all community members and how they would get information and how that information would be helpful, or how to deliver it in a way that would be most effective for that particular community. So outreach, outreach, outreach. Education is another critical aspect. Educating professionals on psychosis and what it is and the best ways to treat it, and also to engage with the program. And young people can have a very different experience than what Katon had and other families have had, and people that have come through the mental health system. And to me, it's so sad that still at this point, we know so much and we're still doing the same old stuff that doesn't work, that's not effective, and that we're waiting for people to get so sick before we intervene. And by that time, it's really difficult to get them to the places, to the road to recovery that they would want. And so we're really limiting their ability to have a full life, full of all the things that we want for everyone. So my hope is that everyone will be committed to this process, that they will not give up no matter what, and that they realize at the end of the day, this is about making a difference in the lives of these young people and their families. And we all can play a part in that. So we wanted to focus it on early intervention because that had the best and most effective impact on young people, and where they can keep their lives and that they can move on to the things that they want to be a part of their lives, and that it supported families through this process, irrelevant of whether the young person wanted help or not. But there was also support for family, there was guidance for families. And so I was so excited that actually there was something there that I believe, had it been there for us, would have made all the difference. And so that's really where my heart's passion has been, is really supporting ESA. I'm on the advisory board here in Multnomah County, and I will be forever really be a spokesperson for that approach that is strength-based, that young people have a say in their care and they get to decide for themselves, because ultimately people have to have their own opportunity to make choices, but at least through ESA, they had choices about how they want to deal with their mental health issues. And I think that's what's most important. You can never determine for a person the outcome of their lives and the choices that they make, but you at least want them to know that they have choices and options. So for us, ESA would have been that piece that Katon would have known what the choices and options were for him, and that intervened early enough that he never had to been so symptomatic. And so we were just excited, and still are excited, about making sure that ESA is nationwide, people know how to access ESA, and that we transform the mental health system as a result of we know of what works and what's effective. So that's our vision.